The sky was too quiet for a hunting day, and Jack Mercer knew quiet skies meant trouble. He stood on the edge of the ridge, boots planted on the hard earth, scanning the horizon like a man who had stared death in the eyes one too many times. His eagle, Talon, circled high above, a shadow gliding against the sunlit clouds. That bird was more than a companion. It was the only living thing Jack trusted, a creature honed by years of training and survival, the kind of predator that made lesser animals vanish when its wings cut the air. And then the shot came. It wasn't the crack of a hunter's rifle, not the echo of any weapon Jack recognized. It was sharp, electric, and wrong, splitting the afternoon sky with a hiss before Talon plummeted like a stone trailing fire and feathers. Jack didn't run. He was too stunned to move. The only family he had left fell from the heavens in a spinning mass of wings, and all he could think was that nothing on earth should have been able to bring that bird down. The crash thudded in the clearing below, snapping Jack from shock to rage in an instant. He barreled down the slope, muscles pumping, eyes locked on the smoldering crater where Talon had landed. He wasn't ready for what he saw standing over the injured bird. 3 figures, tall and too thin, with armor that shimmered like oil on water, clutched strange rifles that pulsed with a faint blue glow. They moved with the precision of soldiers, but they were no soldiers from any army Jack had ever fought. One bent to study Talon as if it had shot nothing more than a pest. Its face was hidden behind a curved helmet that reflected the trees like a warped mirror. Jack froze behind a fallen log, watching. His instincts screamed at him to stay hidden, but his fury drowned out the voice of reason. The creatures spoke in rapid bursts of clicking sounds, metallic and cold. Then one of them laughed. Jack didn't know how he understood it was laughter, but he felt it in his bones. The same way a deer feels a wolf's growl before it dies. His hand slid to the hunting knife on his belt. Before he could move, Talon stirred. The bird, scorched and bleeding, lunged at the nearest soldier with a savage cry that split the air. Its talons raked across the alien's chest, sparks flying where claw met armor. The alien stumbled back, hissing in surprise. Then it leveled its weapon for a killing shot. Jack didn't remember leaping from the log, didn't remember crossing the clearing, only the knife flashing in his hand and the alien crumpling beneath him with a gurgling cry. The other two turned, weapons rising, but Jack was already moving, dragging Talon behind a rock as blue bolts of energy tore through the trees. The air smelled of ozone and burning leaves. Jack pressed his hand to Talon's side. The bird was alive, but barely, its golden eyes burning with the same stubbornness Jack felt in his chest. When the shooting stopped, Jack risked a glance. One alien was down for good. The other two backed toward a strange device half buried in the clearing, a glowing arch of metal that hummed with energy. One tapped something on its wrist, and the arch flared to life. A portal, Jack realized dimly. They were leaving. But before stepping through, one of the soldiers turned. It aimed its weapon not at Jack, but at the wounded bird. Jack saw the moment stretch long and thin, like the world itself held its breath. He dove across Talon's body as the shot came. The energy bolt struck the ground inches from his head, searing the earth. The aliens disappeared through the portal, which snapped shut with a sound like thunder underwater. Then there was only the smell of scorched dirt, the fading echo of the shot, and Talon's ragged breathing. Jack's pulse slowed enough for him to notice the strange glow coming from the alien he had killed. Its armor flickered with lights like dying fireflies. He crouched beside it, still gripping his knife, and yanked the helmet free. What he saw underneath was worse than any nightmare. Pale gray skin stretched tight over a long skull, eyes black and lidless, mouth full of needle-like teeth. The thing shuddered once, then went still. Jack's anger sharpened to something colder. This wasn't random. No hunter shot an animal, then stepped through a magic door to another world. He dragged the alien's body into the bushes, found its weapon, and turned it over in his hands. It felt wrong, alive almost, thrumming faintly as if aware it was in enemy hands. A cough made him spin, weapon raised. Talon's head lifted weakly. But it wasn't the bird that had made the sound. The alien wasn't dead. Its black eyes locked on Jack, lips trembling around words in broken English. The voice was thin and rattling. It said the first thing that began to twist this from a simple fight into something far larger. "They are coming," it rasped. "This, only first wave." Then it went limp for good, leaving Jack alone in the clearing with a dying bird, a stolen alien rifle, and a warning that promised nothing but war. He sat back on his heels, staring at the portal's burned outline in the dirt. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke from the alien weapon, the smell of blood from Talon's wounds, the smell of change rolling in like a storm front. Jack Mercer had lived through Black Ops missions in countries the world had forgotten, had fought men and monsters wearing human faces, but he had never seen anything like this. He knew two things with bone-deep certainty. The first was that whoever they were, they had made a terrible mistake touching what was his. The second was that before this ended, he would make them regret it. Talon shifted against his side, feathers ragged, eyes dim but alive. Jack pressed a hand to the bird's chest, feeling the faint heartbeat. "We're not done," he muttered to himself, to the dead alien, to the empty sky. Somewhere out there, in whatever world those soldiers came from, someone had given the order to shoot his bird out of the sky. Jack promised himself he would find them. And when he did, the last thing they would ever hear would be the cry of the hunter's pet coming for them. Zorthak stood inside the alien command vessel that hovered high above the planet, its black hull reflecting the sunlight like a shard of glass in the sky. He stared at the holoscreen projecting images from the surface below. 3 soldiers had been sent to collect samples, to map the terrain, to test the strength of this primitive world. Only 2 had returned. And one of those carried a story Zorthak did not like at all. A single human had killed one of his soldiers with what they described as a piece of sharpened metal. A human had interfered. A human had drawn blood. Zorthak's black eyes narrowed as he listened to the report, his long fingers tapping against the control panel with irritation. He had conquered 12 worlds, crushed entire armies under his command, but this planet was already proving itself to be a thorn in his side. Still, he smiled thinly. The invasion fleet would arrive soon. Whatever this human thought he would be dust before the next moonrise. On the ground far below, Jack Mercer had no idea an alien commander was watching him with growing interest. He was too busy hauling his wounded bird back to the cabin he called home. The place was a fortress disguised as a hunting lodge, tucked into the wilderness miles from the nearest road. Jack had built it for solitude after retiring from the kind of work that left scars on the mind as well as the body. But now solitude was gone. Trouble had found him again, as it always did, only this time it wore armor and carried weapons that glowed blue in the dark. Jack laid Talon gently on the workbench inside the cabin. The bird's breathing was shallow, wings scorched where the energy blast had burned through feathers and flesh. Jack worked quickly, hands steady as he cleaned wounds and wrapped them in bandages made from torn sheets and tape. He had patched up plenty of soldiers in his time, some worse off than this. But this was different. This was his only friend, the one creature that had never betrayed him, and the anger simmered hotter with every drop of blood he wiped away. The alien rifle leaned against the wall, humming faintly like it disapproved of being handled by human hands. Jack eyed it as he worked, the glow along its barrel pulsing like a heartbeat. He had tried pulling the trigger earlier, aiming it at a tree, but the thing refused to fire. It seemed locked, waiting for the touch of its original owner. Fine. Jack had plenty of weapons of his own. When Talon was patched and resting, Jack went to the corner of the cabin where a metal hatch lay beneath a rug. He pulled it open and climbed down into the basement. Down here the air smelled of oil and metal, and the walls were lined with racks of weapons and crates of gear collected over decades. Assault rifles, shotguns, explosives, knives, bows, even a few toys not available to the general public courtesy of his time in Black Ops. He ran a hand over the nearest rifle and smiled without humor. The aliens might have their energy guns and portals, but Jack had something better. Experience. He knew how to fight, how to hunt, how to kill. And he had no intention of waiting around for another attack. By nightfall he was ready. Dressed in dark fatigues, body armor strapped over his chest, Jack checked each weapon with the precision of a man preparing for war. He slung a rifle over his back, knives on his belt, grenades in his pack. Then he grabbed a battered radio, tuned it to a frequency no one had used in years, and sent out a single coded message. It was a call to certain people who owed him favors. People who did not ask questions. People who would come armed. Outside, the woods were quiet as he moved through the darkness. Jack followed the tracks left by the aliens after their fight, boots sinking into soft soil where the portal had scorched the clearing. He moved like a shadow, silent and focused, until he spotted lights through the trees ahead. The alien camp was small, just 3 landing craft and a cluster of glowing tents that looked grown rather than built, their walls pulsing faintly like living things. Figures moved around inside, tall and thin, rifles slung across their backs. Drones hovered overhead, scanning the woods with narrow beams of light. Jack crouched in the underbrush and studied the layout. He counted 6 soldiers, maybe more inside the tents. Patience had always been Jack's weapon of choice. He waited until one soldier moved off toward the edge of the camp, alone, perhaps to relieve itself or check sensors. Then Jack moved. He was behind the creature before it even knew it was being hunted, one arm snapping around its neck while the other drove his knife up under its ribs. The alien thrashed silently, claws scraping against his arm, then sagged as life left its body. Jack lowered it to the ground without a sound. He stripped the alien of its rifle, still humming faintly, and ducked back into the trees. He needed information before he started a full assault. Watching the camp through the scope of his rifle, Jack spotted what looked like a command console inside one of the larger tents. If he could reach it, maybe he could learn how many of these things were here, maybe even where they came from. But fate rarely made things easy. One of the drones suddenly shifted direction, its beam of light sweeping dangerously close to Jack's position. He froze as it hovered, scanning the trees. The thing looked like a mechanical jellyfish, tendrils hanging below its round body, the blue light from its sensors washing over the undergrowth. Jack held his breath, finger tight on the trigger, until the drone drifted away again. He exhaled slowly. Then the alarm went up. Another soldier had found the dead alien Jack had left behind. Shouts in that same clicking language filled the camp as soldiers grabbed weapons and the drones turned their lights outward. The forest lit up in pale blue as beams cut through the trees. Jack cursed under his breath. So much for patience. He opened fire. The first shot dropped the soldier who had raised the alarm, the second tore through a drone, sending it crashing in sparks. Chaos erupted as the aliens fired back, blue energy bolts slicing through the night. Jack moved constantly, never in the same place twice, rifle kicking against his shoulder as he cut down one soldier after another. When the last alien fell, the clearing was a mess of smoking tents and shattered drones. Jack approached the command console, heart still pounding, and scanned the glowing symbols. He didn't understand the language, but one thing was clear. A larger force was on its way. The timer on the display counted down in alien numerals, glowing red. Hours. That was all the time Earth had before the real invasion began. Talon's breathing was shallow when Jack returned from the alien camp, carrying a pack full of stolen devices he barely understood. The cabin smelled of antiseptic and smoke, his rough bandages wrapped tight around the bird's torn wing. Jack crouched beside him, the anger in his chest a steady, burning thing. The invasion fleet was coming. He had seen the countdown on that alien console, the numbers glowing red like a promise of death. They were preparing to hit Earth with everything they had, and no one in any government even knew it was coming. He thought about trying to warn someone, but the idea died before it really lived. He had been around long enough to know what bureaucracy did to warnings. By the time anyone in charge believed him, the sky would already be on fire. He pulled one of the alien devices from his pack, a small black cylinder etched with lines of blue light. The thing hummed faintly in his hand. He had seen one of the soldiers use it on another wounded alien back at the camp before Jack had opened fire. The soldier's broken arm had knitted itself back together in seconds under its glow. Jack had no idea how it worked, but Talon needed more than human medicine if he was going to fly again. The bird stirred as Jack brought the device close. He pressed aside, and the blue glow spread over Talon's body like liquid light. Feathers shifted in the strange wind it created, the burns along Talon's wing fading as if time itself was running backward. The bird jerked once, twice, then went still. When the light faded, the only evidence of the wound was a few ragged feathers where smooth gold should have been. Talon's eyes opened. They burned brighter than before, a sharp molten gold that seemed deeper, older somehow. The bird stood slowly, wings stretching wide. For a moment Jack felt something strange, a flicker in the air between them, like a whisper at the edge of thought. Then it was gone. Jack stepped back as Talon leapt to the perch in the corner, wings snapping open in a rush of air. The bird looked bigger somehow, feathers glinting faintly as if touched by the same energy that powered the alien weapons. He had wanted his partner back. What he had gotten was something else entirely. Something stronger. The radio on the workbench crackled. A voice came through, rough and cautious, the kind of voice that belonged to men who didn't waste words. Jack recognized it immediately. Old contacts from his mercenary days had gotten his message. They were moving, bringing weapons, but they were hours away. Too long to matter. Jack didn't tell them that. No sense in spreading panic before the sky fell. He turned back to the stolen gear. Among the weapons and drones and strange metal cases was a helmet from one of the dead aliens. He had taken it hoping for answers, and when he slipped it over his head, the inside lit up with symbols that rearranged themselves into shapes he could almost understand. A map flickered into view, showing points of light across the continent. Alien landing sites. Communication towers. And one signal pulsing brighter than the rest, miles north in the mountains. Jack didn't know what it was, but the helmet labeled it with a symbol that looked like a clawed hand closing into a fist. Talon tilted his head toward the map as if he understood. Maybe he did. The bird had always been smart, too smart for an ordinary animal, and now with alien energy running through his blood, who knew what he was capable of. Jack grabbed his rifle, checked the magazine, and loaded his pack. Whatever that signal was, it was where he needed to be. The trip through the mountains was slow, the terrain rough even for a man who had spent most of his life in places people didn't belong. Talon flew ahead scouting, the faint metallic glint in his feathers catching the moonlight. Once or twice Jack thought he saw lights moving along the ridges in the distance, ships gliding silently through the night, but none came close. Not yet. He reached the signal near dawn. The source was an alien outpost built into the side of a cliff, its walls a mix of metal and something that looked grown rather than constructed, like coral fused with steel. Drones floated in lazy circles above it, and 2 soldiers stood guard at the entrance, rifles glowing faintly. Jack crouched behind a boulder, studying the place. A straight assault would be suicide. He had enough explosives to bring the cliff down, but not from this distance. Then he felt the whisper again, faint in the back of his mind. He looked up to see Talon perched on a tree branch above him, eyes glowing faintly. The bird dipped his head once, then launched into the air. The guards never saw it coming. One moment the sky was empty. The next it was full of beating wings and a scream that echoed off the cliffs like the sound of some ancient predator returning to claim its place. Talon hit the first soldier like a falling blade, metal-tipped talons ripping through armor. The second soldier raised his weapon, but Jack's rifle cracked once, twice, and the alien went down before it could fire. They moved inside quickly, Jack keeping low while Talon darted through shadows overhead. The outpost was small but packed with equipment, glowing screens showing symbols Jack couldn't read. In the center of the main chamber stood a tall figure without armor, its skin the same pale gray as the soldiers but with darker markings across its skull. It looked up as Jack entered, unarmed, hands raised slowly. "I am Rin-Ka," it said in halting English, the words shaped like they had been learned in secret. "I am not loyal to Zorthak. I will help you." Jack kept his rifle steady. The name meant nothing to him, but the way Rin-Ka said it made his teeth itch. Whoever Zorthak was, he commanded fear. "Why?" Jack asked. "Because," Rin-Ka said, glancing at the screens around them, "he will burn this world as he burned others. I will stop him. But I cannot alone." Jack looked at Talon, then at the alien rebel. He didn't trust him. But he needed answers, and right now this was the only one offering any. Rin-Ka tapped a control, and the largest screen shifted to show an image of ships descending through clouds like falling knives. "The fleet comes soon," he said. "But there is a way to delay. The towers that guide them, if they fall, the fleet will be blind. They will hesitate. You can strike before they see you." Jack studied the map on the screen, the towers marked in red. Dozens of them, spread across mountains and valleys. Too many for one man. Unless one man was angry enough, desperate enough, and had a bird that now moved like a storm given flesh and feathers. Talon screeched once, sharp and wild, as if he already knew what came next. The hunt was about to begin. The first tower fell just after midnight, fire climbing into the sky as its alien metal twisted and groaned under the blast Jack had planted at its base. Talon had taken care of the guards before they even realized they were under attack, a blur of feathers and talons cutting through armor like it was paper. Jack watched the explosion from the ridge above, rifle slung across his shoulder, eyes cold as the flames consumed the wreckage. One tower down. Too many left. The fleet's countdown ticked on, and each second felt like a hammer striking closer to the end of the world. Rin-Ka had been right about one thing at least. The towers were the eyes of the invasion. Without them, the fleet would be blind, uncertain. But each one was better guarded than the last. As Jack and Talon moved from site to site, the aliens adapted. Drones hunted the skies now, shining pale beams of light through the trees. Soldiers marched in tighter formations, rifles ready. Jack expected this. That was the problem with war. The enemy always learned. By the third tower, the whispers began. At first, Jack thought it was just exhaustion creeping in, the kind of fatigue that made the mind crack around the edges. But the voice was clear, sharp, speaking in a language he didn't know yet somehow understood. It came when Talon was near, like a thought pressed into his head from somewhere outside it. "They will come for you soon." Jack paused in the shadow of the ruined tower, rifle ready, scanning the dark. The forest lay silent, smoke rising from the wreckage behind him. Talon perched above on a broken beam, feathers glinting faintly in the firelight. "You will be the hunted now," the voice continued. "They will send hunters for the hunter." Jack looked up at Talon, unease crawling down his spine. The bird stared back with those molten gold eyes, unblinking, as if waiting for him to accept the warning. The attack came at dawn. They were crossing a narrow gorge when the first shot hissed past Jack's head and burned a hole through the tree beside him. He dropped instantly, rolling behind a boulder, as Talon screamed overhead. Shapes moved in the trees across the gorge, sleek and fast, armor darker than the others he had fought before. These soldiers carried longer rifles, moved with the precision of predators closing in on prey. Jack fired back, but they stayed hidden, shifting positions with each shot. One bolt hit the ground close enough to scorch his boot. He could feel the net tightening around them. This was no random patrol. This was a hunt. He tossed a smoke grenade across the gorge, the cloud blooming white through the morning air. While the aliens hesitated, he moved, sprinting along the gorge edge toward higher ground. Talon dove through the smoke with a shriek, scattering the hunters for a moment, buying Jack time to reach a ridge overlooking their position. He fired in short, controlled bursts, dropping 2 soldiers before the rest vanished into the trees again. Rin-Ka caught up with him minutes later, gasping, a plasma pistol in his hand. Jack didn't ask where he had gotten it. The alien rebel looked shaken, his gray skin damp with sweat. "They know it is you," Rin-Ka said between breaths. "Zorthak sends his hunters. They will not stop now." Jack looked down into the gorge where the bodies of the 2 soldiers lay smoldering. "Then we keep moving," he said. But it was not that simple. The next tower lay deeper in the mountains, through canyons too narrow for easy escape, and the hunters followed with relentless patience. Twice Jack nearly walked into ambushes, saved only by Talon's warning cry from above. Once he barely rolled aside before a plasma bolt hit the ground where he had been standing, the blast showering him with dirt and burning leaves. As night fell, they camped in a cave halfway up a cliff face. Talon perched at the entrance, feathers ruffling in the cold wind, while Jack cleaned his rifle and listened to Rin-Ka. Zorthak will burn this world not for conquest but for pride, the alien said quietly, his voice echoing against the stone. He was humiliated once on another world. He will not risk defeat again. If the towers fall, he will strike from orbit, burn everything so nothing can fight back. Jack considered this in silence. He had seen men like that before, commanders who treated war like a personal game of ego. They were always the most dangerous. Rin-Ka hesitated before speaking again. I sent a signal tonight, he said finally. To my people. Those who still fight against him. They will come. Jack looked at him sharply. You brought more of your kind here? They will help us, Rin-Ka said. Or lead the hunters straight to us. Jack snapped. Neither spoke after that. They reached the fourth tower the next morning. This one rose from the center of a dry lake bed, metal gleaming in the sun, drones circling above it in precise patterns. Jack studied it through binoculars, noting the soldiers on the ridges around it, the heavy weapons mounted at the base. Too much open ground for a direct assault. Rin-Ka pointed toward a cluster of rocks near the ridge. Power source there, he said. If it falls, the tower dies. Jack nodded. He left Rin-Ka behind with the rifle while he circled wide through the rocks, moving slow, careful. The hunters had to be near. He felt them more than saw them, the same way he used to feel enemy snipers in the hills back when the wars he fought had human faces. He was planting the charges when the first scream split the air. Not human. Not alien. Something else. He spun toward the sound and saw one of the hunters impaled against the tower wall, body twitching as Talon tore free and launched at another soldier. The bird moved like living lightning now, faster than plasma bolts, tearing through armor with claws that sparked against metal. Jack triggered the explosives. Fire ripped through the power source, the blast throwing him to the ground. The tower above groaned, lights flickering, then collapsed in a roar of twisting metal. Through the smoke, the hunters came. 4 of them, moving low, weapons raised, cutting off escape routes with precision. Jack grabbed his rifle and fired, dropping one before the others drove him back toward the rocks. A plasma bolt caught his pack, spinning him to the ground. Talon hit the lead hunter before it could finish him, the impact knocking both into the dust. Jack rose, firing point blank into the second hunter as claws and feathers and armor clashed in a blur of violence beside him. When it was over, 3 hunters lay dead. The 4th fled into the smoke, vanishing before Jack could aim. Rin-Ka joined him, eyes wide as he looked at the bodies. They will send more, he said. Jack checked his rifle, jaw tight. Let them come, he said. But in the pit of his stomach he knew the truth. The next wave would be worse. Much worse. By the time the 5th tower fell, the sky to the east glowed faintly with the arrival of the invasion fleet. They looked like stars at first, scattered points of light moving in strange formations, but Jack knew better. Ships big enough to swallow cities whole were descending through the clouds, black silhouettes cutting across the dawn like the shadow of an axe. The countdown was nearly done. He had destroyed 5 towers in 2 days, but too many still stood. Even with Rin-Ka guiding him through alien defenses and Talon striking from above like a living weapon, the task was impossible for one man. The radio crackled while Jack studied the distant lights through his rifle scope. The men he had called days ago had arrived at last, a half-dozen trucks full of old soldiers and outlaws who lived off the edges of maps. They came armed with rifles, shotguns, hunting bows, even a few homemade explosives packed in crates marked fertilizer. Men with sunburned faces and eyes that had seen too much war stepped out of the trucks and looked up at the descending fleet with the same tight jaw Jack felt on his own face. Not fear exactly, but the hard knowledge of a fight coming too big for any man to walk away from clean. Jack explained the towers, the fleet, the countdown, his words short and sharp over the distant rumble of engines in the sky. They listened without interrupting, then began unloading weapons, moving with the quiet efficiency of men who had fought enough battles to know when there was no time left for talk. One of them, A broad man named Carter, who had once served with Jack in places the newspapers never printed, looked at the dead alien rifle on the ground and spat. "Never thought I'd fight something that wasn't human," Carter said. Jack loaded a magazine into his rifle. "You get used to it." Rin-Ka stepped forward, drawing every eye in the camp. The gray-skinned alien spoke haltingly, the words thick but clear enough. He explained the towers again, the way they linked to the fleet overhead, how their signals guided the ships through the atmosphere like beacons. Carter stared at him with the same expression men used on poisonous snakes, but no one interrupted. They all understood the same thing. If those towers stayed standing, the world burned. By afternoon they were moving through the valleys in 3 groups, splitting off to hit as many towers as possible before the fleet reached low orbit. Jack led one team with Rin-Ka and Talon cutting ahead through the sky. Carter led another with 2 trucks full of explosives, while the third group carried stolen alien rifles taken from fallen soldiers. The attacks were fast and brutal. Drones swept the ridges with pale lights, soldiers poured from armored landers shaped like black beetles, and the air filled with the hiss of plasma fire and the crack of human rifles. Jack's group hit their tower from 2 sides at once, explosives blasting through its power base while Talon dove through smoke and gunfire to tear apart soldiers before they could regroup. The bird moved faster than anything alive had a right to move, feathers flashing with alien light as it ripped through armor like paper. By the time the tower collapsed, Carter's group had already taken down another miles away, though half their trucks burned in the valley below. The third group lost 2 men destroying theirs, but the tower lay in twisted ruins by the time Jack's team reached them. Each strike slowed the fleet's advance a little more, forcing the ships to hover higher in the clouds, their movements less certain without the signals guiding them. But the response came swift and heavy. The alien hunters returned in force, twice as many as before, their rifles cutting down trees and stone alike. One group ambushed Carter's men in a canyon, pinning them down until Talon swept through like a blade of wind and feathers, scattering soldiers long enough for grenades to finish the job. Another wave hit Jack's team near the ruins of the 8th tower, their leader a massive figure in black armor with a weapon twice the length of the others. It moved with terrifying speed, deflecting bullets with a shield of crackling energy until Jack planted a block of C4 against its chest and shoved it off the ridge before it exploded in a flash that lit the valley like lightning. By nightfall only 2 towers stood between the fleet and the open skies. Jack gathered the survivors in the shadow of a burned-out lander, while Rin-Ka studied a portable screen taken from the enemy. Alien symbols glowed red across the display, a map of towers and ships and troop movements shifting faster than Jack could follow. Rin-Ka pointed at the largest signal pulsing at the center. "Zorthak," he said. "His ship. He watches everything from there. If he falls, the rest will break." Jack looked at the men around him. Carter wiped blood from a cut on his forehead. 2 others leaned against the wreck of a truck, bandages dark with dirt and smoke. They were outnumbered, outgunned, running low on everything except anger. And yet no one suggested retreat. The plan formed fast and ugly. Carter's remaining men would hit the last 2 towers with every explosive they had left. Jack, Rin-Ka, and Talon would board Zorthak's ship during the chaos, using a stolen lander taken from the last ambush. It was a bad plan, the kind where half the people involved usually ended up dead, but there was no time for anything better. They launched at dawn under a sky choked with smoke and falling ash. Carter's trucks roared toward the last towers while Jack piloted the stolen lander through drifting clouds toward the massive shape of Zorthak's ship hanging above the mountains. Alarms screamed from the alien console as they approached, but Jack kept the nose steady, Rin-Ka feeding false signals into the ship's defenses until they drifted through a docking bay lined with black metal like the ribs of some enormous beast. Jack slung his rifle as the hatch opened. Talon launched into the air, wings flashing with firelight, as the first wave of alien soldiers rushed to meet them. The hunt had carried them across mountains and valleys, through smoke and fire and falling towers, but now it led here, into the heart of the fleet itself where Zorthak waited with the full fury of his army. Jack checked the magazine in his rifle and stepped into the dark, the roar of battle rising through the bay as the fight for the world began. The docking bay shook with the roar of engines and gunfire as Jack moved forward, rifle tight against his shoulder, eyes sweeping the shadows between pillars of alien metal. The soldiers came in waves, black armor glinting under the harsh white lights overhead, plasma bolts cutting the air into lines of fire. Talon streaked above like a shard of gold lightning, diving into soldiers with a speed and fury that turned their formations into chaos. Jack advanced through the wreckage, firing in short bursts, dropping enemies before they could regroup. Rinkov followed close behind, his stolen plasma pistol hissing with each shot, eyes locked on the massive doors at the far end of the bay where Zorthak waited beyond. The ground shook as one of the towers far below collapsed in fire, Carter's men keeping their part of the plan alive. Jack felt the deck shudder under his boots, the entire ship groaning like it sensed the battle turning against it. They had to move fast before the fleet recovered, before more soldiers filled the bay with enough fire to cut them to pieces. He signaled toward a side corridor, while Talon ripped the last guard from the catwalk above and let the body drop in a shower of sparks. The corridor twisted through the ship like the veins of some giant beast, walls lined with pulsing lights that cast everything in a cold blue glow. They moved quickly, past control rooms filled with fleeing crew, past windows showing glimpses of Earth far below where the last towers burned in plumes of black smoke. The fleet above the planet wavered now, formations drifting without their signals, some ships circling aimlessly like predators cut off from the scent of prey. Rin-Ka led them toward the command chamber at the ship's core, his steps sure despite the alarms blaring through the metal halls. The alien rebel never looked back, but Jack saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand clenched too tight around the pistol. He was carrying more than fear of death. He was carrying old hatred, the kind that burned colder than anger. The doors to the command chamber loomed 3 stories high, carved with the same clawed symbol Jack had seen on the map days ago. They opened without sound, sliding apart to reveal a room so vast the ceiling vanished into shadows. At its center rose a platform surrounded by a ring of hovering screens, and on that platform stood Zorthak. He was taller than the soldiers, his armor etched with dark lines that glowed faintly red, a long blade resting across his back. He turned as they entered, the light catching his pale gray face, eyes black as the space beyond the windows towering behind him. "So," Zorthak said, his voice a low growl shaped into words by translators hidden in the walls. "The human who kills my soldiers comes at last." Jack lifted his rifle but did not fire. Not yet. He could feel something in the air around the alien commander, a pressure like standing too close to a storm before it breaks. "You should have stayed in your forest," Zorthak said. "I would have burned your world quickly. Now you have made me angry." Jack shot first. The blast tore through one of the hovering screens where Zorthak had stood a moment earlier. The alien moved with impossible speed, closing the distance in seconds, the long blade flashing free from his back with a hiss. Jack barely rolled aside before the weapon split the floor where he had been standing, metal shrieking under its edge. Talon struck from above, claws raking sparks across Zorthak's armor, but the alien swatted the bird aside with a backhand blow that sent it crashing into the far wall. Jack's rifle barked twice, 3 times, but the shots glanced from the commander's armor as if it wore the night itself for protection. Rinkov fired from the side, shouting words in the alien tongue that made Zorthak pause for a fraction of a second. Then the commander turned, and Jack saw recognition in his black eyes. "Traitor," Zorthak said. "I will carve your name into this floor before I burn this planet." He lunged at Rin-Ka, but Jack slammed into the alien's side, driving both of them into the base of the platform. The blade clattered across the floor. Jack grabbed for his knife, driving it between plates of armor at the alien's shoulder, but Zorthak hit like falling stone, throwing him back with a single blow that left his ears ringing. Talon launched again, faster this time, golden feathers blurring into streaks of light as the bird's talons sank deep into the alien's armor. Zorthak roared, spinning, trying to tear it free as Jack snatched the fallen blade from the floor. It felt heavier than any weapon he had held, a deep vibration running through the hilt like it hated human hands. Rin-Ka shouted something Jack didn't understand, and Zorthak turned toward him just as Jack drove the blade through the gap Talon had torn in the armor. The alien commander stiffened, the roar dying in his throat, black eyes locking on Jack with a look that carried no fear, only rage so deep it promised this was not the end even as his legs buckled under him. The platform shuddered as alarms screamed through the command chamber. Rin-Ka stumbled to the control ring, slamming his hands across symbols glowing red. The ship groaned as if in pain, lights flickering along the walls. "We have minutes," Rin-Ka said, voice tight. "Core overload. It will take the fleet with it." Jack dragged the blade free as Zorthak collapsed, the alien commander's black eyes still locked on him even as life drained away. Talon landed beside him, feathers scorched, wings spread wide as if daring anything else to rise against them. They ran through the corridors as the ship shook itself apart, walls splitting, fire racing along the ceilings. Through a viewport Jack saw two of the fleet's largest ships collide as systems failed, both plunging toward the atmosphere in trails of flame. Carter's men had done their part below, towers gone, signals silent, the fleet blind and breaking apart in chaos. They reached the docking bay as fire rolled through the command decks behind them. Jack shoved Rin-Ka into the stolen lander, Talon diving through the hatch after them as the floor split open where they had stood seconds earlier. The engines roared, lifting them through falling debris as the flagship tore itself apart in a storm of fire and metal. They cleared the bay in time to see the ship buckle in half, a blossom of flame swallowing the sky as wreckage rained into the clouds below. Across the horizon other ships burned, some colliding, some falling toward the mountains in trails of smoke until the fleet was nothing but pieces of fire streaking through the morning. The lander hit ground miles from the wreckage, skidding through dirt and broken trees before stopping against a ridge. Jack staggered out into the ash-filled wind, watching the last of the burning ships fall behind the mountains. The world was silent except for distant thunder where wreckage struck the earth. Rin-Ka stood beside him, gray skin marked with burns, staring at the smoke rising where Zorthak's fleet had died. "It is over," he said quietly. Jack watched the sky a long time before answering. "For now." Talon landed beside him, wings folding tight, eyes still burning gold. Somewhere beyond the clouds survivors might already be carrying word back to whatever empire Zorthak had served. But that would be another fight for another day. For now the world still stood, and the hunter walked away with his bird into the wind as the sun climbed over the smoking horizon.